Even though the sun had risen above the cloud layer, the walk from the bedroom to the kitchen made me want to jump under the covers. What would Brass think of me now? Would he think that I was some loose stallion, that he could just get me drunk and in mood? He did say he was interested, but could I even assume he'd do all that? He didn't seem the manipulative type. Oh right, going to puke. I nudged the odd thoughts from my head as I tried my best to sneak to the upstairs bathroom. Ultimately, for no benefit, because once I was a single hoof in, I bowed in reverence and gave my booze offering to the porcelain goddess. I could hear Harmony chuckle from the kitchen as the smell of cooking beans and cram filled the air. I wiped my muzzle clean on a towel that was hung over the wall and looked up in the mirror. I had a large scar over my eye from where 42 had hit me. It ran all the way around the front of the socket to meet a nearly similar one that grazed my cheek. I'm not sure if this made me look badass or just prone to injury. I shrugged and muttered to myself. Not worth it at all, but it's still different, nonetheless. I ran my hooves under the water, my eyes jumping to the unfamiliar correlation on my right hoof, as I forgot about the events of yesterday momentarily. "You coming down, hun?" Harmony chimed in from downstairs. "Breakfast's almost ready." I turned my head to respond, catching a glimpse of a single red bar in that direction showing on my compass. I panicked and scrambled out of the bathroom, flying down the stairs while nearly losing my balance halfway down, causing me to slam into the railing at the bottom of it and crack it. I'm heavy. Momentum sucks. I blame physics. Brass, who had been passed out on the couch, shot awake and scrambled to his hooves. Didn't think it was warranted that much of a rush, Harmony said as she walked in from the kitchen. I turned around again to respond before noticing the red bar was to my left of the stairs. Not sure how it got inside. "You all right here?" "Someone's here. I can see them," I said, as I frantically looked over the sides of the stairs. Why would it say they were in the wall? The only thing in the cellar... Oh. Shit. "Backlash, calm down." Brass called out as he walked over in time to see me throwing the cellar door open, slamming the door down in front of his hooves. I looked down inside the open arms room to see that the bar was Crankshaft. "You're just not used to the EFS on your pit buck." The curious look of the ghoulified Crankshaft stared up at me from the floor in the arms room. "Miss me that much, brother?" He called up with a sly grin growing across his muzzle. I turned to shut the door on him, angry that my compass thing, EFS, or whatever, as Brass had said, couldn't tell me what floor enemies were on. I mean, it was a pretty bad design oversight. I stopped for a moment as his mark changed from red and was now a non-hostile pink. As I continued again to swing the heavy door up, he said something I didn't expect. "You know, I was on my way to see that pink cunt yesterday when I saw your sky car off in the distance. She wanted to see me. I assumed that's why I had failed the job, and I was about to go tell her to fuck off. But lo and behold, you delivered yourself onto me, and I came running." His eyes seemed different now. He seemed remorseful. "See, you probably saved my life by not letting me go, and as much fun as that's been, she's going to come looking for me. It won't be long before she figures out where this place is and comes to knock down my door." I stepped down the steps curiously, as the brick room next to the empty arms cache, my generated hoof aching with each step. "So, tell me why now? Why not let her surprise me and get your revenge?" I asked as I raised an eyebrow to him. "Because I meant what we said. We're family," he said, as he flopped his head back down to the floor. "She'll kill me anyway when she gets here, and I want her to. I don't want to be left like this. But you need to go. Even if you surprise her, she'll still win. Run for it. Get as far away from here as you can. Go live your life somewhere she can't find you." He looked up at me with teary eyes. "Because you can still be a better pony than I was." I felt bad for him. I know I shouldn't. but he actually sounded sincere, like he wanted to do something good for a change. Maybe I just wanted to believe that he was still strong in a noble cult that I grew up with so long ago. But he had given us the chance to finally not be caught off guard by 42, and I wasn't going to ignore his advice. He sniffed and shut his eyes. When you leave, shut the vault door. At the very least, I'll buy some time to hightail it out of here. Just promise me that you'll kill that pre-war bitch next time you see her. He said with a low, harsh tone, choking back tears. Goodbye, Backlash. I'll make sure to tell Mom you said hello. I hit the round blue button on the wall, the door letting out a soft hiss as it swung closed with a latch. I turned and walked up the steps quickly, noticing that Brass was just fitting the chest piece of his armor into place. Harmony had gone and turned off the kitchen equipment and brought me a flak jacket and saddlebags from upstairs. She kissed me on the cheek lightly as I secured them both, drawing a deep blush from me. So, Backlash, what's the plan? Brass said as he twisted on his helmet. His autoload is feeding his minigun and anti-machine rifle with fresh ammo. He pulled from some of the crates yesterday. Which direction do we run? I'm thinking we head for the silo, I said, as I looked out the window nervously. You mean towards the forest? That's crazy. Brass stomped lightly for emphasis. We even take a risk hiding in the tree line. Harmony leaned over to him. We hid in there from your assault and came out unscathed. I know where we can pass safely if... We're not going to run. I cut her off, looking over to Brass, who I knew was going to ask the next dumb question. Nor are we going to fight. I believe Crankshaft when he says we aren't well equipped enough. I watched the young stallion relax slightly at that. Then, what will we be doing? Harmony said, with a cant of her head, her slow words more filled with worry than curiosity. I walked over and swung the front door open, heading outside to finally take on the carnage of the previous day. The charred and mutilated corpses of nearly 30 ponies lay strewn about in front of the house, decorating the various rocks with strips of pony flesh, looking like some sort of grotesque confetti. My mind halted in my own train of thought with how much that sounded like something 42 would like. I turned around to face them, sliding that into the back of my mind to get the topic at hand. We slow her down. It's time I take back my car. It had only been 15 minutes or so of waiting before the dusty plume of the Marauder kicked up as it rolled closer could be seen on the horizon. I silently thanked Crankshaft in my head that he didn't wait longer to warn us. The three of us huddled near the door inside the large silo, watching through a small hole in the wood as the Marauder pulled up in front of the house. It came to a stop with a small skid before 42 shut the engine off and hopped out through the windowless door. I could feel my blood boil as I saw her walking to the porch with a determined look on her face. I wanted to shoot that face off, so... Wait. Was she looking at us? I raised my hoop to the others to get their attention as I saw her grinning softly towards us. How the fuck did she know we were here? Did she have the same psychic sense that Pinky and I did? I mean, I don't know why she would, I guess, but... Clones hurt my brain. I relaxed a bit as she slowly turned and walked into the house, shutting the front door with a slam. Okay, let's go, I whispered to the others, slowly reaching over and pulling the door open. The others nodded before slipping out ahead of me. I figured that if Brass's noisy-ass suit could get in all the same as Harmony, then I could make a mad dash for the driver's seat, hop in, and get us going. In an odd side note, being a push-button start meant that anyone could just walk up and steal it. Whose brilliant idea was that? Once we were a little more than halfway between the silo and the car, I followed at a swift gallop, stumbling for a moment on my weak hoof when I heard the sadistic laugh of my brother from inside the house, followed by the sharp retort of a gunshot. I skidded on my hooves and slammed against the rusty car, praying to Celestia that the spark batteries would hold out until we were at least a good distance away. I opened the door and jumped in, hitting the starter and listening to the whole whine of the capacitors to charge. but was once again met with only silence. I sighed and tried again, and then again. Fuck, I grumbled softly. So I started digging around in my saddlebags. I thought you said we'd been moving by now, Brass said nervously. His speaker felt like it was cracking to 11, even on the lowest setting. I hoofed at the button again before giving up on it. Calm yourself. I know how to fix it. I snapped back angrily as I drew out the Marauder's tire iron, holding it between my hooves as I remembered that Sky had said the morning that this whole adventure started, bringing the tool down hard on the dashboard repeatedly. Screaming out, I don't want to fucking die here, you piece of... The capacitors whined, and the engine roared to life, making me pause and drop the tool to the floor with a smile. Finally! We can go home. I threw the deafening steel beast into drive and floored it, kicking the lines of rock and clouds of dust as we took off into the wastes. I looked in the rearview mirror, struggling to see through the growing plume as 42 ran out of the porch and fired wildly at us. A few of the shots found their mark as they thunked against the body of the car. The rest ricocheted off the steel body, or missed as the house shrank behind the horizon. Her scream mixed with my own voice as I laughed like a mad stallion for nearly a minute before catching my breath as we bounced wildly over the dirt and into the old highway system. Fuck yeah! 42, you can kiss my... Backlash! Brass yelled, up in panic. Harmony's hurt. I swerved off the road as I slammed on the brakes, bringing us to a quick stop before looking into the back seat. My stomach churned as I saw Brass trying to apply pressure to a gushing wound in Harmony's neck, making me freeze up. Oh, Celestia, what do I do? Skies knows all the medical stuff. I don't know what to do. Celestia, what do I do? It's okay. You gave me hope. She choked out, a steady stream of crimson flowing from the side of her muzzle as she spoke. I got to see you again. She coughed and smiled softly, her eyes locking into mine, and brighter than I'd seen them. Spit, I did it. I saved you. She relaxed as her voice trailed off. Her gaze drifted to the floor coldly as she gave her last breath, slumping against the door lightly. Luna, no. We just won, damn it. We just beat 42 at our own fucking game for once! My eyes clouded as I looked down at the small, round hole in the back seat where the bullet came through. Funny enough, I think that if the trank was there, the round wouldn't have gotten in. But I was not a smart soap-pony who removed it. I watched as Brass lowered his hoof and stared at me through the eyeless eyes of his helmet. I spun and smashed my regrown hoof into the dashboard in anger, feeling the jabs of pain as I hit it over and over. Backlash. We need to go, Brass said through his own tears, the speaker even seeming to amplify his sadness. I didn't want to go anymore. I didn't want to have to deal with trying to stop 42 anymore. We need to get to the others. With as much as it hurt, he was right. More than ever, we needed to keep going. I hit the accelerator and got us moving again, keeping us on the road towards Manhattan while I wiped the tears from my eyes. As we rolled over a pothole-filled hallway, I watched myself get lost in thought, trying to first just keep my mind occupied. But being the fucked-up pony that I was, my mind ended up bringing up the faces of the 28 in Ponyville. I cursed myself for having forgotten some of them, knowing that they were my burden to carry. I needed to remember, because if I didn't, no pony would. My mind screamed out to me with that thought. There was one other. There was still one Ponyville resident left. Brass, did you see Pallet anywhere with 42 back there? There was a long moment of silence before he answered the one thing I didn't want to hear. No, I did not. He seemed to pause again for a moment, before adding, maybe 42's keeping her somewhere. Or maybe she just killed her, just to add to the growing body count weighing me down. I wondered how many more bodies my mind could handle seeing before completely breaking down. I doubt 42 killed her. She might need her again, to use her as leverage, just in case we ever got the upper hoof on her. His words took a moment to sink in, before prying me out of the fog of depression I was lost in. His logic sharp enough to sink deep. You're right. She's probably still alive. But what would 42 do now that she was stranded out in the middle of nowhere? It was too much to hope that she would just sit down and die. Even then, we still had no idea where she hid Pallet. No, 42 was coming for me. I know it. I had just showed her up. I had just made this personal. And in stereotypical supervillain fashion, she would try to get her revenge. We drove in silence for another 2.5 hours towards Manhattan, before the last of the spark batteries the Marauder was running on died. I begrudgingly got out and lifted the hood, stripping the spent batteries out before shoving the single, half-dead one from my saddlebags into the first slot. Without the constant trickle from the other 7, this one will drain much faster, even with the battery controller. We won't get much further, but I hoped they would let us at least get far enough that I could find a settlement. The problem with the Equestrian wasteland was that as new sources of salvage were discovered, whole villages sprung up, almost overnight, starting to pull pre-war ruins apart the day after. It also worked the other way around, though, as I had once watched as a set of supply depots were cleared and entire towns was stripped and abandoned from sun up the next day. Yes, communities like Ponyville existed, but they were so few and far between now that mostly a lot of ponies lived in them because they didn't believe safety in numbers, or they offered some sort of city work. With 42's arrival stirring up the wastes, and the loss of Ponyville itself, I don't think that first idea holds true anymore. I slammed the hood shut, looking around the gray horizon for a moment, for anything that looked like a place that might house ponies. Coming up with nothing, I decided to use the map function on my pip-buck to see where we were, unhappy to see that our ride had taken us less than halfway to the nearest settlement. I turned and got back in, trying not to glance at the back seat where Harmony's body was. I heard Brass move his helmet with an unfamiliar hiss as he shifted in the back. This is our last battery, so keep an eye out for a place to stop or any traders on the horizon. I said back to Brass through a sigh. I was suddenly hit with a sudden understanding of the practicality of a skycar. What was only a 4-hour trip for a skycar was nearly 2 days on the road. Even without 42 after us, it might have seemed unbearably slow. There's an old quarry not far from here. His soft voice coming oddly from behind. I turned to see him with his head hung out the window, looking positively green in the face. We can ask for help. He arched his back hard and began to throw up out the window, the foul liquid making my pip-buck click softly. I looked down to notice the rad meter was in the green. Wait, green? I guess Skyline or Harmony must have given me some rad away while I was recovering from the whole severed hoof thing. Just keep going, he groaned out slowly. Yeah, if you could try to avoid the holes in the road, that'd be great. I nodded and hit the ignition, letting the loud engine rumble to life as I sat back. I drove us at a more relaxed pace than before, as we were not in need of escape, and we had to save time and running from 42. I sighed sadly as we rode for the next 15 minutes before I saw the sign for the quarry, remembering I had passed there many times before while on my route with Sky. There wasn't anything out here other than a couple of rusty bulldozers and a small, gutted office trailer. Why Brass wanted me to stop here was beyond me. I saw a flash of light from the high dirt walls of the old complex, turning the car sharply as a gunshot tore the passenger seat rear mirror off. The tires screeched to a halt as the car sharply skidded sideways before coming to a rest. I ducked onto the floor as the dust cleared, landing painfully on top of the tire iron I had left on earlier. I rubbed my chest as Brass opened his door and rolled out, heaving in loud gasps as he threw up yet again. "Stay where you are!" The obnoxiously loud boom of a power-armored helmet called out from the distance. I could hear the loud thumping of heavy hooves approaching as I lay in the car. "You have been deemed a criminal of the wastelands and will submit to the authority of Manhattan Steel Rangers, Delta Contingent." As the voice got closer, I could now make it out as the voice of a mare. Her tone was that of a steadfast duty, like she truly believed herself to be one without a doubt, talking to criminals. "I'm the Steel Ranger Acolyte, brass tacks of the Manhattan Contingent." I heard the young stallion choke out from the pavement. "Stand down. We are not the fugitives you're looking for." Brass spoke as I heard a soft hiss from his suit, followed by the chunks of his dismounted weapons as they dropped to the roadway. "I'm Paladin Longbow, and I regret to tell you that Acolyte Brass Tacks was marked as killed in action on a mission 2 weeks ago, and that this vehicle has been reported to be operated by a known criminal of the wastelands," she said with a tromp. Wait, how could they think Brass was dead? The remark making my mind run back to the encounter at the MOM bunker that started all of this. The group that took down the purple Olicord must have been looking for his group when I was transported, which also meant they left before he showed up. "Stay on the ground. You and your supplies will be determined and detained in our facility until we can establish your identities." I felt the door open behind me as I was dragged out unceremoniously, flopping on the ground with a thud as magical monocles were forced on my forehooves, and they forced them together painfully. I turned my head back to see the helmet levitate off the midnight blue unicorn mare, standing a few feet from me in polished power armor. I assumed unicorns didn't wear helmets because of their horns, but I looked through the hole drilled into her silver headgear as it was levitated beside her. She held her head high. Her longer-than-normal horn cut through her black and light blue striped mane, as her large, soft blue eyes looked down at me for a moment before they were drawn over to the car. Black power armor? Her eyes narrowed as she pointed her twin snipers at the side of the car Brass was led around. "Since when did the Enclave start outfitting ghouls with this kind of tech to do their own work?" "No matter. Take them away for questioning. The rest of us have to get this vehicle in storage." I was levitated off the ground and onto the back of one of the power-armored soldiers, writhing and trying to get at least a little bit comfortable as he trotted me over to the quarry. I looked back to see Brass was being flanked by 3 soldiers as he walked slowly after us, my view getting cut off as the suit I was riding on turned and strode into a cave. While I never checked deep into dangerous caves when we stopped places, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have noticed this place with how many suited soldiers were striding around here. We were heading towards an open, rectangular steel door that looked more like a bulkhead on a ship than an entrance. My captor must have forgotten I was riding, or didn't care, when we entered, because they trotted too close to one side, making me smack my head on the doorframe with a loud thunk. "Hey, watch it!" I cried out, as they twisted down a set of steep stairs, descending a few flights before turning down another hallway, once again slamming my head into the doorframe as we passed through. "You know what? Fuck you," I barked out as I tried to rub my head with my shackled hooves. I swear to Celestia, I was going to buck this ranger so hard when I got this sorted out, that he will wish I sent him to the moon. Maybe I could even borrow Brass's armor to help. The Steel Ranger's bunker seemed impressive. Its long metallic hallway unpredictably cut off into smaller rooms at regular intervals. Small groups of robed acolytes worked with various arcanotech devices as we walked by, not even looking up from their work. As we took a right and walked down the long hallway, a group of young fools came screaming by chasing another, seemingly unfazed by the armored brute carrying a random wasteland prisoner. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I knew nothing about how the Steel Rangers even lived. I always knew they lived in underground bunkers, but I had imagined the interior to be a bit more cozy. This place had no color, no expression, no lavish at all in it at all. No wonder they were always such ruthless bastards. These places sucked the individuality right out of them. We stopped inside of a small room with a single table with a large metal box set on it. I looked around as a pair of stallions in robes lifted me up and stripped me down to just my pip-buck, putting all of my gear onto the box before throwing me back to the top of my armored escort. As we continued, we wound down quite a few more flights of stairs and through another assorted sections of hallways. The ominous thumping of the arcane reactors that powered the base seemed to come straight from the walls. The low tone seemed deafening in my mind. "How can you ponies stand to live here?" An elder mayor's voice spoke out as I was finally brought to a small room in the end of a hallway we were in. It was poorly lit by a single dim bulb, illuminated a metal pole rising from the floor in its center. It seemed to be the only feature in the mostly dark room. "We choose to live here because the outside is just too barbaric to the alternative safety of the bunkers." I knew that voice. She was there at the entrance to 42's bunker. Her words slid out of the darkness, oozing with elation as I was chained to the post and locked in. "Strawberry sherbet," I said with a glare as her red eyes came out of the darkness. A hood cloaked her gray coat and mane as she stood at the edge of the light, her eyes wavering for a moment in surprise. "You never forget a name when you're in the mercantile business." Her eyes narrowed as she gave a small laugh. "I'm hardly surprised. But you know, as you see, the moment you claimed that bunker for the MOM, you stepped into my business." She started to pace in circles around me as she spoke, not shifting her gaze once she was left of my own, and came back into view from the other side of me. "Now, I understand competition is good for everyone in your little world, but I rule mine with an iron hoof. You see, as you and that pink mare run around committing atrocities with the weapons of the old world, I'm trying to protect the innocent ponies caught in the crossfire. It is my job to take away all the fun toys from all you little primitive wasteland foals, and when I do, then Equestria may finally have a chance to grow again." What was it that happened nearly 2 weeks ago that made it so every new pony I ran into had the sudden urge to be a stereotypical villain with a master plan to save the wasteland? Did ponies sound like this before the war? If we did, it was probably the reason we blew ourselves up. I chuckled softly at that thought, catching a glimpse of rage shooting across the elder's expression. "I'm not with her. I merely reclaimed the property she stole from me," I retorted smartly as I shifted uneasily on my rear hooves, twisting at the post I was hooked onto. "Oh, we're aware of this." Her eyes beamed through the darkness as she spoke. "That obnoxious stallion in Tenpony keeps reminding us of this while we are just as interested in stopping that pink mare as you are. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting to use the radio on that thing. Which reminds me, why didn't they remove it with all the other stuff? I mean, they had brought the other ones I'd found, and those didn't even work. So, why tell me all this? Why keep me here at all?" My voice was calm as I could make it, trying to hide the fact that she had me set up in this room unnerved the ever-living hell out of me. "Because I need you to provide me with a service," she said with a small smile creeping across her face, glinting in the soft light. "You want to negotiate?" I paused for a moment, not believing it for a second. "With me." I raised an eyebrow to her, following her as she continued walking slowly around me. "Then why the room? Why the setup?" "You can always say no," she replied with a forceful frown, her eyes looking away as she nodded her head slightly. "But because you know of this base, I'd have to keep you down here for the rest of your life, which incidentally wouldn't be very long. Prisoners seem to keep dying down here, and the murderous perpetrator has yet to be caught. It's quite a pity, really. We've lost a lot of good prisoners to whomever they are." Wow. I never thought that the Steel Rangers would go that far. Sacrificing even their basic morals to obtain pre-war junk was bad. But now this? If anything, I'm glad Brass got out when he did. Wait, well, maybe not so glad. He has gone through some pretty rough shit with me as well. But at least we weren't forcing innocent ponies to submit or die. I didn't want to imagine Brass ever growing up to be as cold as this. This isn't a negotiation. I spoke up before getting lost too deeply in my own thoughts. A negotiation is when both sides get something. So if I do this, I get something out of it. I watched as her smile widen slightly. I was only going to have one shot at this. If you don't like it, fine. Leave me here. I wish you all the luck in finding someone else who is related to a ministry mayor. I turned my muzzle up and away, trying my best to look indifferent. Well, I'm sure we could find someone in Tenpony or Friendship City, she snapped back, her voice filled with a cold hatred. Could just keep killing them on that bunker door until some pony went through. One of these days I'm going to ask Brask if he was born without a heart, or if she had lost it in some pre-war ruin and couldn't find it again. You could do that. But the last thing DJ Pone 3 would broadcast to Equestria was that all Steel Rangers aren't to be trusted, and should be killed on sight. Oh, and before you say, have the armor to fight ponies and win 10-1, remember that with all the might of the wasteland against you, it'll be more like 100-1. It will be a wasteland with a rifle pony behind every blade of dead grass, behind every rock, and inside every ruin. I leaned as close as I could get, twerking my bindings as she came around again. Unless you want to play these odds, then give me a real deal. Strawberry Sherbert stopped and walked up to me, dropping her hood and letting her short gray mane droop around her head in a small bowl shape. Fair enough. I'll let you and your friend go if you agree. Not bad. I tilted my head in thought. For an opening bid. First, tell me the job. She shook her head slowly with a frown. You don't get to know. You want to negotiate a price. That's what we will do. If we reach an agreement, then I will tell you the job. Her voice denoted she was hesitant. So the job had to be worse than I could think possible. So if it was okay that I start high with my demands and give her something outrageous to agree to. Fair enough. I rolled my eyes with a sigh. But I get to keep any of the tech I find, even if you succeed on this little crusade you have planned. I'll have Steel Ranger immunity, per se. Now she counters with a low bid. You get to keep none of the tech you find, and I will take anything else of yours I find remotely interesting. She glared at me, her voice sounding a bit overconfident. Oh, and you will submit to the Steel Rangers like every other wasteland primitive. Shit, I thought she might come in low at 5%, but 0% was a bit harsh. Well, tough customers call for my A-game. I get to keep half the tech I find, with the option to sell it to you for double its value. I feigned a waver in my voice and looked around the room sharply, happy to see her smile grow from the performance I gave. All right. At least I know that without a heart, she could still play right into my hooves. You can choose 5 pieces of tech, should you recover any, and I will pay you 10% of their value for them, and I will confiscate any extra pieces without any compensation. She leaned close. Her gaze was now unwavering, almost boring into the depths of my mind. I choose 2 pieces of tech to keep, and 3 to sell for 1 and half their value. I straightened up my gaze, glaring back at her with a tight grin. Her eyes twitched momentarily, just enough for me to perceive it. Final offer. Is that so? She said slowly, as she loosened up a bit, her gaze drifting up the side as she thought. You'll be paid 1/4 what each item you recover is worth, keeping none of it. She nodded to the guard in the room behind me, and I felt the magical shackles disappear. And even then, I'll let you keep that death trap of a vehicle. It does no good to us in such unstable condition. I beamed a smile at her and held out my unbound hoof to her.
Deal.